Hey you, yeah you who clicked on this video. Thanks for giving our channel a shot. And if you will, please do us the honor of watching the video all the way through. Appreciate it. Now onto the video.
With everything going on in gaming recently, whether we're talking about the many acquisitions between Sony and Microsoft, basically acquiring new and existing IP through buying out publishers in mass, or we're talking about the complaint issued by Microsoft against Sony, basically alleging that they are paying developers to keep their games off of Game Pass specifically. All roads seem to lead back to Game Pass. So let's talk about it. And really, the purpose of this entire conversation is really to talk about Game Pass and the subscription model when we're talking about games and whether or not this is a net benefit for gamers, for publishers, for developers, and ultimately for the gaming industry as a whole. So let's get into it. So, when we're talking about the subscription model of gaming, we have to understand that the subscription model is not new. If you really want to go like really way back and dissect the subscription model of gaming, the most rudimentary example I can give is GameFly. Right? You subscribe to the GameFly service and you had access to different disc-based games. You could rent these games, they send you your disc out, you play the game. I think you could do at most was 2 at a time, and you play these games, you send them back, and then you could get 2 more games off of your list, right? Seemed innocuous enough. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that. Doesn't hurt anybody really. GameFly obviously had to purchase mass quantities of each game. I would assume for full price in order to offer them day and date with the release of the game to their customers. So who wins in that scenario? The publisher wins because those are sales. So the developer wins because those are full price sales. The customer wins because they get to pay a low price premium to get access to games that may or may not have been outside of their budget. And everybody's winning. The wheels keep spinning, right? Well, how is that different from Game Pass? Let's talk about that. So, what is Game Pass? Well, Game Pass is Microsoft and Xbox's subscription-based service in which you have access to a rotating library of titles that are either classic Xbox titles, backwards compatible titles, third-party titles, some day-and-date releases, whether they be first or third-party. You can access these games on your Xbox or on your PC. And anywhere else that you can use Game Pass on. So, this service, you pay a monthly fee, and you're able to either download, I think it's mostly download. I know you can stream certain things, but for the sake of this argument, we're going to be talking about downloading these games. And the games, a lot of the games are there for a undetermined amount of time, but once they're removed from the Game Pass service, you no longer have access to these titles. Okay. So with that being out of the way, what does this mean? Like, how are the inner workings of this? Well, from everything that I can gather, the way that the service works in terms of the back end is that Microsoft, let's say that you're a publisher or a developer that is developing a new game, and Microsoft sees the value in this. Well, they basically back up a truck full of microbucks to that developer or publisher's doorstep and they ink out an agreement to where the game will appear on Game Pass. And so it's essentially Microsoft compensating them for the sales that they would have lost or would not get as far as full price sales in exchange for that game appearing on their service. Okay, so when we're looking at that, is this model good and is it sustainable? Well, for the consumer in the present day, it is a good deal. It's a good deal. I mean, you're paying a pretty low premium. I think at one point it was like $10 a month to have access to this title, this onslaught of games. Okay, so that's good. That's a good deal, right? But what does that mean on the back end? Well, so here's my issue: is that in the short term, I mean, especially for publishers are winning. They're getting this money up front that they would not have had to make with individual sales, and that seems like a good thing. But kind of on the contrary, you're looking at a situation in which, especially if you know anything about game development, you know that the development teams are usually given essentially, let's call them sales goals and milestones to reach once a game has been released. And if a game does well, especially in the press and especially with sales, if they hit certain numbers, they are given incentive pay, bonuses, things like that. And they're told about this upfront when they're contracted to start a project. So let's just imagine for a second that Microsoft, of course, they back up their truck full of micro dollars to a developer. Well, now that publisher has already been paid, and so now the money that publisher would have gotten for stretch goals and incentives is probably going to go away. And why? Because if the game is on Game Pass, there's no incentive to purchase the game at $60. Benefits the customer, benefits the publisher, developers asked out. Okay, now what happens then? Well, let's say that this developer or this publisher enjoys getting a truck full of micro dollars backed up to their door. Well, now they can eliminate the incentive pay programs for their developers, outright. So now the developer has very little incentive to give 110% because there's no financial incentive for them to do so. So eventually what you get is that you start getting lower quality games, because we all know the saying, you get what you pay for. And even though the publisher's happy, if the developers aren't getting that, extensive pay for incentive pay, then, what's the point of working as hard, right? So then the quality goes down and the consumer becomes upset. And then Microsoft ends up losing because you might have some very disgruntled customers after that. Now, remember, subscription services are based on continual growth. And what does that mean? That means that the service itself has to continue to get new subscribers and more subscribers to keep a profit going. Okay, we've seen this with streaming services and subscription-based services in the past. We've seen this with Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, you take your pick. But when the subscriber counts go down because of a lack of quality content, then we see that the stock price for said company goes down because the subscriber count is their money. And if the subscriber count goes down, then the shareholders are upset and stock price goes down. Stock price goes down, shareholders are upset, and then people are losing money. Now, why is this not sustainable? Well, Microsoft is already trying to basically stop this before it starts. And the way that they're doing this is obviously they've grown their first party family in quite a large way in the last couple of years. Whether we're talking about the Bethesda acquisition or we're talking about the Activision acquisition, we see a bunch of different development houses and publishers under those umbrellas that now belong to Microsoft. So that means more titles for Game Pass. However, games take a while, especially with long development cycles. Games take a long time to come out. And what we're seeing in 2022 in particular is that Microsoft has no major first-party games coming out. So Game Pass's quality of life and its value is determined on how much new and AAA content they can pump out on the service at a time. And right now, it's very hard for them. They're having to use third parties to fill the gap until 2023 when some of their games are coming out. And so you see that this is not necessarily sustainable with development cycles, going 5+ years. So I know that Sony is, trying to combat this with their particular subscription service with the PlayStation Plus Premium program going out. Boy, that was a lot of P's. But anyway, that program, which I find a value in as well, I feel like they are not in a position to do what Microsoft is doing, and I don't think that they should, because I find that, here's the thing, as a consumer of games, if I could pay less for games, I would be really happy about that. But as a business person, I do understand that by supporting the games that you really believe in, not only does it help the market decide what is the wheat and what is the chaff, but it also shows developers what you want, and it basically is, we're able to get a gaming industry that's more consumer focused. When you can just throw things on a subscription service, what you're doing is you're diluting the market in a way that you don't really understand what is working and what isn't. And what happens is like a company with like Netflix, once they figured out, remember at Netflix you could have put a Netflix original on anything. Netflix was buying any script, anything, any idea, and throwing it on their service at one point. And what ended up happening is that they realized that people were not subscribing because they were just throwing crap on the service. And so they started canceling a bunch of stuff. Now, what does that look like in the video game industry? Well, what that looks like is you're going to have publishers that aren't necessarily owned by Microsoft that are used to getting those Microsoft checks. And once the data comes into the people that run Microsoft's Game Pass, they're going to see that certain games have no engagement, and those games are going to get rotated out of the service. And then those publishers are no longer going to be tapped on the shoulder to put more games on Game Pass. And so that money that they were leaning on is going to go away, and those publishers are going to have to go back to the old way of doing things. And I think that this is going to be really disruptive in the gaming market. So realistically, I don't think that this is a good thing. I think in the short term, Game Pass is fantastic, especially going into a recession. I think that the more gamers that have access to games is a good thing, but I think in the long term, I really do think that this is going to be a very disruptive force in the gaming market, and I really feel like Game Pass, especially if other majors like Sony and Nintendo follow suit in the way that Game Pass is implemented through Xbox, I feel like this is going to hurt the gaming industry. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, whether or not you think I'm off base with this, whether or not you think that, that Game Pass is just the best thing since sliced bread, or whether you think that maybe a more measured approach to a subscription service needs to be delivered in order for everybody to benefit, gamers, developers, publishers included. All right, guys, well, that's going to be it for us for this particular discussion. See you on the next one. 8-Bit Hero.
If you'd like to get a shout out on the channel, then hit that like button, maybe share it with a couple of friends, and do us the biggest honor of all, and subscribe to the channel so you can join the 8-Bit Heroes family. And while you're at it, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when our new videos come out.